What are you most excited about when it comes to Nil V2?
Um, I think just the whole automated aspect of it. So now we have kind of like a contract factory that artists will be able to use without needing to know how to develop a smart contract. And they'll be able to use it to create their own custom contract with no code or anything like that and deploy their drops. No like technical knowledge really needed, and everything's going to be done in like the right way, where the creator can focus on their creation and go from there.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching today's episode. Today's episode, I have a very good friend of mine, a core contributor to the Nil DAO. His name is Maximonee. He is anon, but he's a pretty cool guy if you get to know him on the Discord. Part-time DGen, although he does not like to admit it. And in today's episode, we're really going to be talking about the dark side of NFTs. Right, Maximonee is a great developer, and he usually always looks at the smart contract side of the NFT market. And there's a lot of things that I believe that he has information that he should share, because when I learned it from him, I was very shocked. So without further ado, we're just going to jump straight into it. Maximonee, how are you doing, my man? Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, doing good, thanks. Thanks for putting this together and having me.
No, I appreciate you. Right before we get into it, maybe I know you're anon, but would you like to maybe share like an anon background, maybe a little bit about your experience and
Sure.
what you've done in this market so far?
Yeah, sure. So I still work full time. I work full time in actually security. So that's kind of why a lot of what I talk about or share is more like security focused than developer focused. Um, but I do on the side a lot of stuff in like the Web3 space. So mostly like development for like NFT smart contracts and things along those side. And then also, like you said, uh, part-time DJing at night, which is becoming more and more less or less and less part-time.
I feel you. I feel you. Amazing. So let's dive straight into it. I think one of the important foundations I want you to lay for us is maybe kind of explain to us. I know there's three different ways that NFTs are stored. And I think it's super important that everyone understands that as we continue in that conversation. So maybe tell us the three different ways that NFTs are stored so far.
Yeah, sure. So we have basically I'll go from best or worst to best. So basically, the worst case scenario is some kind of centralized storage. So by centralized, I mean like one server or one organization that's running the resources needed to host that asset and the metadata. So that's usually just like a server on some cloud storage or maybe like if anyone's familiar with AWS, an S3 bucket, which is just like a storage solution. And basically what that means is um, it's up to that one company or that one person to continue to host that metadata and that JPEG or whatever the NFT is. So if that person decides 1 year down the road that they don't want to keep paying for their server or they don't want to, they're just like kind of tired of it, they can just stop hosting it, take it down, and then your NFT metadata and asset is gone. Um, it doesn't have to be malicious. It could just be like negligence or you know like you just have to think about it. Like think about in 20 years. Like, do you really believe that this one person that started an NFT project is going to pay for their server for the next 20 years? Like that just seems incredibly unlikely.
Yeah.
Um, so there's centralized. That's kind of like the worst scenario. And unfortunately, it's actually used still quite a lot. Like there's a lot of projects that you probably wouldn't think are centralized, but they actually are. Um, and then there's kind of the second tier, which is decentralized storage, but not permanent. The main one here is IPFS. And what's interesting about IPFS is that it's not really a true storage solution. So basically what happens is you have to do something called pinning your data. And what that means is that you have to pay for this pinning service or you need to run your own IPFS node that's going to make sure that your data lives there forever. And if you stop pinning your data, then it's possible after a certain period of time, then that data is going to go away. So IPFS is not actually permanent. It's just decentralized. So there's a bunch of nodes that run that can store your data, but there's no guarantee that they're gonna be doing that forever. So it's a step up from centralized in the sense that it's not just one person running it or hosting the data, but it's still not permanent, which still has the exact same risks as before. And it's the same exact thing. So you have to either run your own node, which again, like it's very unlikely that a normal person is going to be doing that forever, or you pay for a service, which is like a $10 or $20 monthly fee indefinitely. Like, that fee never goes away. So again, like that's something that can also fall through the cracks. It doesn't have to be malicious. It can just be like, the person's credit card that they were paying for the service expired and they never updated it, which I can definitely see happen. And then we have kind of like the third, I guess there's actually like 3.5 tiers. So there's the third, which I'll say is like on-chain or slash permanent. Kind of group those together. So permanent, when you say something is fully on-chain, that means that the asset itself and the metadata is not pointing to some URL. It's actually directly tied to your token ID. So that means all the traits and all the metadata properties, as well as the actual image data that makes up your image, is stored on chain. And that's usually only possible for very simple data types, like pretty much only SVG files are stored on chain, which is why this is not more common. Because storing anything more complex is basically like cost prohibitive to the level that it's just not even possible. It's not just that developers are being cheap about it; it's that it's just not really feasible at all. Like the
Makes
cost
sense.
goes up an insane amount. So so like for those watching, they're probably familiar with N, the N project. N is fully on chain, and that's like if you look at it, it's not ultra complex, so it makes sense that you could store something like that on chain.
Makes
But
sense.
something else like the recent project for Nil, Unfoldry, and like that would be pretty much impossible to ever store that.
Yeah, I have a feeling. I'm not a developer, but I feel like something like that would break the bank.
Yeah. So then the like 3.5 here is a permanent storage that's also decentralized. So what we use and like the most common one that we see is Arweave, which is permanent storage. So you don't basically when you're deploying your assets, you pay a one-time fee up front, which is actually fairly reasonable. It's not that expensive, and then you're guaranteed that your data is going to be stored on the Arweave chain forever.
So you're
Um,
saying, I don't mean to cut you off. I
sure.
just want to make this clear. You're saying that the storage solution that Nil uses is Arweave, and Arweave has permanent storage solution, and you're going to break that down for us. I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, correct. So so we at Nil use Arweave, and that was a pretty important thing. I think like what's interesting about how we handled it is from the get-go, like even before Nil V1 launched, we wanted all of our drops to follow like a well-defined and high standard. So that means like we didn't just allow any type of smart contract on. It had to be reviewed by our team. It had to go through the process to make sure that the metadata and the assets are stored on Arweave, that there's no like backdoor functions or anything like that, and that basically that if you're minting or buying an NFT that came from Nil, that it's following some certain standard. And kind of getting back to what Arweave is it's I've heard people call it like storage blockchain. So it's technically like on a chain, it's just not on Ethereum. But yeah, so like the main perk there is that you pay once and it's going to live forever. So, or as long as Arweave lives, which we're hoping is forever. Um, and the benefit there is you're not relying on one person or a group of people even to make sure that they're going to keep paying a certain fee to keep your assets alive. Like you're once you know it's on Arweave, you know it's safe forever. So there's a massive kind of like ease, or from an investor perspective, even like it just feels much more assured that you can buy this NFT knowing that nothing's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And has it started to become like a common thing? Like, do you think investors are educated on this? Like, are NFT projects expected to be on Arweave? Like, what's the sentiment? Like, because I'll be honest, I've been, a degen for quite some time, and I'm just knowing about this, right? So, what do you being a degen yourself, what do you think is the current viewpoint with a lot of investors? Do they expect this, or are they completely oblivious to this?
Yeah, I think unfortunately more in like that latter category. So I would say I've never seen really like any projects suffer because they're using bad practices. Like I think more often than not, it's not really even a second thought. I have seen some projects kind of promote the fully on-chain aspect, which sometimes can help. But even then, I feel like that should be helping more than it is. Like there are a lot of projects that like I would say pretty much like 90% of the projects are in IPFS, which is like the middle tier solution, which
Yeah.
is okay, but it's not great. But people don't care about that. There's plenty of projects also on centralized servers that people don't care about. And I think it's going to take, one or two major incidents where like a blue chip level project assets go away and the people realize like, oh God, we've been like, what are we even buying here? We're buying something that can just go away in a week when the whole point of NFTs and blockchain is that it's permanent and, immutable and things like that.
Yeah, no, I think it's the same. I think the same way as well. Like it might need to take one or two really solid projects that people were expected were solid to just to disappear, and it just proves how important storage is. Now, you kind of touched on a point, and I want you to further expound on this. You talked about how the ethos of NFTs was supposedly supposed to be permanent and immutable. Yet there are some practices that a lot of NFT projects adhere to. You talked about this. One of them that you mentioned is apparently some projects have the ability to even change how many pieces can be minted, change the mint price, and all that stuff. So, kind of maybe talk to us, like, how is that possible? Myself as an investor, I was told that NFTs never change, right? They're immutable. So, what's going on here? How is that happening?
Yeah. So like one thing I've noticed is that a lot of NFT smart contracts, they give so much access to the developer, in terms of changing like core parts of the contract. So what I think of an NFT, I think of something that is immutable, it can't change, and the it's decentralized and trustless. So like you don't have to really trust the developer at a certain point. Like it should be something that's static after a certain point. The NFT itself doesn't need to be static, but like like the parameters for the whole collection should be like something that you can trust. And there's a lot of smart contracts that give so much like mutability to the code that it's almost like it's not even immutable. Like for example, like many of them give the ability to change the price in the middle of a minting. So at first glance, that's not like a terrible thing, and it's not like it's usually malicious. But as like an investor, you want to go in knowing that okay, this is the price, and if the mint is going a certain way halfway through, it's not just going to change.
Yeah.
And like there was one example I saw where um, like the project had a ton of hype during the mint, so
Yeah, I
they
know which
paused it
project you're
after
talking about.
pre-sale, and
Yeah,
they said, okay, well, we're going to raise the price because there's so much hype. And like honestly, I think their actions actually killed that project because not only was that bad, but then the fact that they did a lot of other things that basically made it seem like okay, we're going to extract as much revenue as possible from the mint, and the reveal um, that it kind of like killed trust and whatnot. And I think that ultimately they shouldn't even had the ability to do that. Like they shouldn't have had logic in the smart contract that allowed you to change such like core parts of it. And also there's a lot of it's not malicious. So like I've seen some that like just look like bugs where they can mint like an infinite amount. The team supply is unlimited, and it didn't adhere to the max limit of the collection. So even though like the public mint only allowed 10,000 mints, they had like a kind of like a backdoor function that allowed the team to mint as many NFTs as they want. And that's probably not malicious. It was just probably just like an afterthought when developing the smart contract. But it's things like that that give it like that give so much risk in the process when we're supposed to be kind of developing things in a much more trustless way.
Makes sense. So, understanding all this, could you maybe like give us an example of a project you've invested in that has adhered to all these things, right? Permanent storage, the code is not malicious, it's fair. Like, have you seen any projects like that, or we've yet to see any?
I don't want to shill nil projects, but honestly, like I think that we've done like a really good job in that sense. So, like to give like an idea, so all of our projects, all the data, if it's not on chain, it's on Arweave. So that's like number one. The storage aspect is set. But even if your storage is good, it's not entirely safe. So there's something that pretty much every smart contract has, which is a way to update the metadata at any time. And this is usually done because one, it's done for like during the reveal process, so like to not have it revealed right away. Two, it's done in case there's metadata errors. They can go back and change it, which these are all good things. But at a certain point, when everything's like set in stone, it still gives the developer access to change the metadata, and they can do whatever they want with it. They can, switch up the NFTs to make it to give themselves the rare ones. They can rug the project. They can do whatever they want. But what we did is because we kind of have this DAO structure, we have the function that allows metadata to be changed is only able to be altered by the DAO multisig. So the
Hmm.
developer or the artist can't kind of just arbitrarily rug the project if they want to. They'd have to get the DAO multisig to do that, which gives like a significantly higher level or bar to make sure that these NFTs are safe and they can't be altered. Um, but in terms of like kind of like other projects, like there are like I feel like most of the on-chain projects are pretty good in this regard just because like they can't really mess it up so much unless they added all these kind of like mutable functions in their contract. But in terms of like storage and permanence, those are all generally pretty safe. Most other projects though, like to be transparent, like, I don't really know if I've ever seen any other projects using permanent storage. At least any major projects. Like I said, like 90% is IPFS and 8% is probably like centralized, and then these are all just complete random guesses, by the way. And then like maybe 2% is on chain or Arweave.
Makes sense. Now let me ask you this: in a play to earn game scenario that uses NFTs, is there let's say a conflict of interest between the NFT ethos, like the crypto ethos, and what the play to earn NFT has to do? Like, so for example, let's say there's an NFT, and as the game goes on, the metadata of the NFT changes. Is there any way for there to be a safeguard where a developer, like you said, it's not based on the trust of a developer, or is it in cases like a play to earn game, the community or the players really have to trust the developer? Like, is there a safeguard between that, or is it's one or the other?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, honestly, it's tricky because in those situations, the games and the assets, like they need to change a lot.
Yeah,
So, in those cases, like there's always going to be like some level of trust, but the developer can do a lot to make it so that the trust needed is very low. So, like for example, if they need to alter things that are based on the developer input, it should be done through some kind of multi-sig, so it's not just up to one person.
yeah,
Or if they need to, if they need, like basically they should develop the smart contract in a way that leaves as little room for ambiguity or like rugging or whatever you want to call it as possible. Like if you're reviewing a smart contract, you can tell right away like, okay, this looks very standard, and there's really not much the developer can do to alter things. Like, and then there's also ones that are like, super beefed up that have so many different functions in it that allow core aspects of things to change. And again, like in most cases, these aren't malicious. These are just like giving the access in case something goes wrong. They want to have
Yeah.
the ability to change things. So like I think the core, at least for just like kind of normal NFT jobs, I would like to see um, contracts be like a lot simpler, a lot more clear, and only give access to update things that absolutely need to be like. You don't need to have every single parameter that goes into a drop or a collection be modified. Really,
Yeah.
only like very few need to be.
I see. And is there anything else that you think that the average NFT investor should be aware of? Like now we know that, a lot of projects are slacking on the storage front. The NFT ethos is really not been upheld for the most part. Is there anything else that you would, because it's always great to have a developer who's also a trader, right? Someone who invests in different projects. I feel like those two worlds are usually separated. So, is there anything else that we should know about, or is that about it?
For the most case, that's it. I would like obviously I can't recommend that everyone learn Solidity or anything like that, but I would like recommend trying to catch like the common flaws. Like after a little bit of time, it's actually not that hard to catch them. Like so I would recommend kind of reviewing like a normal like a lot of the popular contracts because a lot of them look the same. A lot of them are really just like copy paste 90% of the time, and then you can use that to kind of like find a difference between the like what a standard NFT contract looks like versus other ones. Another thing I would recommend is only minting projects that um, the contract is verified and that like someone you trust has kind of reviewed that
Yeah.
or at least like posted something about it because a lot of these contracts actually are not verified, and what that means is that the source code is like if you go to Etherscan, sometimes you'll see a green check next to a contract and it'll say it's verified, and that means the developer um, kind of I guess uploaded their source code to Etherscan and allows people to view it. Otherwise, it's just something called bytecode that can be decompiled, but it makes it a lot harder to read.
Uh,
But once the contract's verified, you can read the exact source code in the contract, see if anything looks malicious or anything like that, and then mint it that way. Because, like, honestly, it's scary. I feel like at some point there's going to be a massive rug that happens where there's a super hyped up project that has an unverified contract that's doing something that you wouldn't expect it to do, like
yeah.
transferring more funds or whatever, and no one's going to be able to review the contract. Like some people might decompile it, but again, that's not like it's not a perfect way to view the exact code or the code in an easy way to read. And there's so much of this industry is based on hype and like FOMO that
Yeah.
it's almost guaranteed to happen. And I'm just waiting for it, and I'm trying to warn people like don't just ape into anything that you see. Like just give it a minute. Like yes, you might miss out on some opportunities, but you should follow a few people that you trust and like wait for their kind of input on things.
Yeah, I noticed especially with the last few airdrops we had, almost all of them were unverified from the start, and you had people just blindly investing. And I remember you tweeting saying, "Be careful," and I was like, "Okay, I don't really understand what this means, but I'll wait." With all that being said, Nil V2, around the corner, couple weeks hopefully. What are you most excited about when it comes to Nil V2?
I think just the whole automated aspect of it. So like if you kind of saw behind the scenes for all of our other drops, you would like think it's kind of a mess and there's just so much going on. And like I know a lot of people have commented that oh it's what's going on taking so long between drops, but like we had so many manual things. Like we had developed each contract individually and unfortunately they were pretty much like all very different drops and they all implemented something new. So it took a lot of work and testing to make sure that they were working properly. So now we have kind of like a contract factory and um, that artists will be able to use without needing to know how to develop a smart contract, and they'll be able to use it to create their own custom contract with no code or anything like that, and deploy their drops very easily. No like technical knowledge really needed, and everything's going to be done in like the right way, like the way we've been describing, like all that's going to apply so that the artist can just focus on, or the creator can focus on their creation and go from there.
Yep. No, I agree. All the problems we discussed, Nil thought of clearly and has answered. And I'm super excited for it as well. Max, I really appreciate you for your time, man. That was a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge. I think it's super important to be careful in these markets. Like, I know it's fun degenning. Quick story. I ran into Max yesterday in a Discord late at night. Like, we didn't even plan to meet there, but I just saw him and it was very, very funny. But it's always best to be safe, because at the end of the day, the goal of any investor is to protect your capital. So, yeah, Max, thank you so much for the wisdom and the knowledge, man.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'll make sure to link Max's Twitter down below. Make sure to give him a follow. He does tweet a lot of insightful stuff, especially when it comes to the dark side of NFTs, as I like to call it. But that is pretty much it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to follow Max, again, the link is in the description, his Twitter. And if you want to follow us at Nil DAO, Discord and Twitter is down below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And next week, I will see you with another awesome podcast episode. Take care, everybody.